Dragon Age Act 2 has my favorite story to tell about this game, but since it's at the end of the act, let's work towards it, shall we? So where were we? Ah yes, Hawke had moved into a crazy little place called Kirkwall full of mages, Templars, red lyrium, and plenty of weirdos. Hawke started off as lower class due to her uncle blowing the family money at the tables, but she slowly worked her way up as someone actually kind of respectable. The first act was mainly to lay the groundwork for the next 2 acts and give you a chance to see what the city was all about while you try to make enough money to a ticket to the Deep Roads. There, Hawke's brother was bitten by Darkspawn and sent off to the Grey Wardens, and Hawke found amazing treasure that set her and her mother, and Sandal, up for life. So here we are, 3 years later. Hawke lives in the sweet estate up in Hightown and is trusted by the Viscount, which is basically Kirkwall's mayor, to help with political dealings. This act tells you right away that it's about the Qunari, which I suspect the devs were excited to try and tackle. The idea is that these Qunari have been squatting on their fort with their spears and their explosives and their big horns and are just making everyone nervous. They're even recruiting some elves who were tired of living in the alienage and wanted to do something good with their lives, especially since the local police don't seem to respect them at all. The Qunari are foreigners to the natives of Kirkwall. They believe in a strict rule of honor, and they have their own code, and they don't respect most of the low-lives that lived in this corrupt, live-and-let-live town. Honestly, I think someone is reading a little too much Batman. Kirkwall and Gotham have a lot in common when it comes to corruption and dueling powers and strangeness. And the Qunari have enough in common with Ra's al Ghul and his pseudo-Middle Eastern style and twisted beliefs that the comparison is pretty clear. The difference, of course, is that Ra's lives in the shadows, while the Qunari are these big, scary horn dudes living in their guarded fort. And it seems like the Qunari don't want to fight unless they're provoked. And of course, Kirkwall, well, they love to provoke. That's what Kirkwall does. They're provokers. So the only person who the Qunari want to talk to is, you guessed it, Hawke. Hawke has built a reputation with the Qunari, and the Viscount believes that she can talk some sense into them. Everyone knows that I like playing Hawke as silly as possible, but I think giving her this edge of being honorable really makes her a unique character. It's the perfect formula for a superhero. I mean, a little sass and a set of personal codes that apply to everyone that you interact with. It's basically how Spider-Man operates. My Hawke was silly, but she treated the Qunari as fairly as she could, despite the cultural differences. This small detail plays very well into the game, but I suspect that if you spent the first act disrespecting the Qunari at every turn, this request by the Qunari to take care of this problem wouldn't really make any sense. Still, if you play the game this way, it has this great sense of immersion. You really feel like you're connecting with the Qunari, you feel like you can do something, you have enough power in the society that you could actually change the tide of things. And to me, it really drew me into the story. As it turns out, someone has stolen the formula for poison gas, and everyone can agree that if it gets out, it would be bad for Kirkwall. Again, I can't help but think of Batman racing the clock before Joker can distribute his poisonous gas. The gas itself is even puke green, and what you need to do to stop the gas from spreading is exactly what you'd expect out of a bad Batman comic. There's literal barrels of poisonous gas. And what you do is you take a latch that's on a goon, and then you systematically close all the barrels before everyone dies. Oh, but I guess that one way Hawke isn't like Batman is that she kills a lot of people. She kills a stupid amount of people to the point where one episode, I felt bad for the pile of bodies that I had created. You have to kill all of these poor goons to get the latch to close the barrel. And before you know it, there's just as many dead people scattered around the map that you'd expect if the poisonous gas actually got out. So, who in their right mind would want to poison Kirkwall with Qunari gas, effectively starting a war between the city and the Qunari? Well, an elf who is tired of watching her people defect to the Qunari. I love this idea. I mean, the elves seem powerless and disrespected throughout even the most liberal areas of Dragon Age. Most of them live in the worst parts of the city, and the rest are forced to live in camps away from civilization. Later on, we learn that elves may not be literal slaves in most places, but they are treated like them and paid next to nothing. It makes sense that so many elves turn to the Qunari who frighten normal people and have a code that seems to just say strength. An elf who loves her people and her culture would surely grow tired of seeing her brothers and sisters turn to the Qunari for help. So it makes sense that she'd try to frame them and get them the hell out of the city. But you're superhero Hawk, and you are not going to let this lady, who has obviously been breathing in the fumes, get away with it. Once you defeat her, if you're honest about everything, you manage to hold back the swell of chaos, and you, the cool dude from Kirkwall, get to keep the peace once again. I know what you're thinking. Enough about Hawk. What about Varric? Okay. So Varric's brother, Bartrand, had tried to lock him in the Deep Road so that he could keep all the money to himself. And our buddy, Mr. Chesthair, isn't taking that so well. But I mean, who could blame him? Varric is the kind of character who has seen every story played out, and he couldn't even predict when he was going to get played himself. At this point, Varric doesn't know that his brother turned because of evil qualities of red lyrium. He spent the last 3 years fuming because his good-for-nothing brother betrayed him for money and left him for dead. Varric wants to kill his brother. It's fun seeing Varric this upset and angry. Usually he's pretty laid back and he likes to joke. If you notice, whenever you have Hawk tell a joke, Varric's like, ugh, and you get like a little reputation for him. But this time he's really serious and he is not kidding about killing his own brother. So this game has a little fun with this quest because, as you remember, Varric is the one telling the entire story. I mean, the entire game is told by Varric to Cassandra. So when Hawk meets up with Varric at the house that they think his brother is in, Varric goes in himself and suddenly you are playing him, fending off waves of goons, a true hero of the story. Cassandra calls bullshit, and suddenly you're back to them talking, and Varric is forced to tell the quote-unquote real story. I love when the game messes around with the narration. It's like one of my favorite parts of Dragon Age 2. I mentioned how I forgive a lot in this game because it's framed around a story that Varric is telling. And whenever he abuses that fact in his story, it makes for really fun gameplay. So anyway, after killing the goons the normal way with Hawk's entire party, you find out that the red lyrium idol has been singing to Bartrand. Even after selling it, he still wanted to hear this song. He found that by mutilating his slaves, he could hear the red lyrium song, if only for a moment. This is great storytelling about red lyrium. If you remember, regular lyrium already has kind of drug-like qualities that help Templars fight mages and mages do magic. Red lyrium is the darkspawn version of that, and they're evil crystals that turn people mad just by being near them. I love the idea behind this, except for they totally ruined it in Dragon Age Inquisition, where you can literally go hump a piece of red lyrium and you never ever hear the sweet song of madness. There's even a collectible item that I think you get through a DLC. It's this mage weapon staff, and the head of it is this giant bowl of red lyrium. And I honestly couldn't even play the game with it because it totally broke my immersion. I was like, I can't, in good conscience, while I'm dating Cullen, have a red lyrium idol as my weapon. Like, I just can't. It just ruins the game for me. If BioWare had managed to utilize this evil rock idea correctly, and maybe even have an effect on the main character in a convincing way, they would have done so much more for this series. And I don't think it would have been that difficult. I mean, they have the whole, like, evil good thing, and when you go super Sith in Knights of the Old Republic, you get all, like, weird looking. So why not do that too with red lyrium? I don't know. Okay, so back to Dragon Age 2. Varric has been talking about killing his brother, but it's so easy to convince him that Bartrand is sick, and the red lyrium is really what's to blame. And Varric decides that he will watch over his brother. Even though BioWare pretty much biffed it with the red lyrium in the next game, they did manage to use this quest as a way to make Varric more somber and serious when it comes to that stuff. But the good news is that even though you lost your dad and your sister and your brother is a Grey Warden, there's just no way anything bad could happen to your mom. Oh wait, no, she's gone missing? Oh no, she's been dating a freaky dude who's been a serial killer this whole time you've been in Kirkwall? Oh no, your mom was cut up and pasted to the bodies of other women to recreate the killer's dead wife. Oh Jesus, oh God. Oh no. So this quest, it feels like the game is punishing the player for something they didn't do. I understand if there was like a few quests where your mom's like, hey, hang out with me, and you're like, no. Or if you didn't look into the serial killer roaming the streets, then yeah, the consequence of that is your mom turns into this horrific scene. But you could have been the best Hawk daughter, and it doesn't matter. This quest isn't fun, and it's sick for the sake of being gross. It sucks. For a game that seems like it's about a jovial champion of a crazy little town, this quest feels completely out of place. It doesn't just somber the mood of the game, it makes the player not want to pick up the game again because it's such an emotional punch. But I think what the game was trying to do was make the consequences of mages being on the loose hit close to home. Yes, Hawk herself is a mage, but just because she uses her power for mostly good doesn't mean there is another mage that isn't going to stitch up women and make a zombie bride. After this quest, how could you possibly feel sympathy towards freeing the mages? Even with sweet little Meryl on your team, you know that she's crazy enough to keep an overly powered mirror in her room where she sleeps. How could you feel that mages should be free after seeing your own mother butchered in a way that someone without powers could ever do? So that question about magic and mages and whether or not they should be free and the Templars and all that stuff, so the game just leaves that question hanging in the air for the third act. Now we're back to the Qunari and a lot of dead bodies. I know I've mentioned the mountains of corpses that Hawk leaves in her wake before, but Act 2 really stops even trying to hide its crappy wave combat mechanics. In case you don't already know, this is how most fights go in Dragon Age 2. Here's some dudes. Oh no, there's suddenly some dudes behind you. Haha, wait, there's some more dudes in front of you that you didn't see before. This is just boring combat design, folks. This means that there are a lot of goons jumping out of the woodworks for you to fireball to death. And when the big fight is over, you find yourself having to step over dozens and dozens of people you've killed while quipping with your friends about how much fun it is to kill people. Even in the case of taking down some crazy fanatics that want to kill Qunari because they're different, you don't feel like a hero mowing these people down. It doesn't matter what they did because the body count alone is just too damn high. If I was Hawk, I'd hang up my mage stick because I was tired of slaughtering people. It goes without saying that killing so many dudes takes you out of this game, and sometimes makes it hard to even sympathize with Hawk, despite her awesome personality and quirks. It's surprising that there are still people left in Kirkwall to join the Qun, but apparently the Viscount's son wants in. The Viscount thinks his son was tricked into joining the Qun somehow, I don't know how that works, but the Qunari insist that he joined on his own accord. Someone else, namely Patrice, who tried to mess with Qunari mages in Act 1, has different ideas. She lures the Viscount's son to the Chantry and kills him herself in an attempt to frame the Qunari. So there's a couple different things you can do here, but trying to frame the Qunari to start a war seems like a stupid, evil choice. I know there's people that play Hawk as stupid, aggressive evil, but to me it's just too much. Like, do you want a bunch of people in Kirkwall to die for no good reason? Because that's exactly what's gonna happen. Any idiot can see that. Not that it matters. You can help frame the Qunari, you can try to expose Patrice for who she is, it doesn't actually matter. The game chugs along towards its act finale. The game writers must have realized that if a player tried hard enough for peace, they could have received it. And it would have mean that their cool boss fight would have been completely avoided. So they throw in one last effort to have that boss fight, whether you want it or not. As it turns out, Isabela, who is probably your girlfriend at this point, has maybe kind of sort of helped steal an important book by the Qunari, and the Qunari can't leave town without it. So basically, the Qunari have been squatting in Kirkwall for so long because they can't find this book, and it's all the fault of one of the best characters in the game. Ooh. As much as this is an obvious ploy for conflict, I love this little twist for Isabela. She's been with you for years, having fun and pillaging, and she still can't escape her pirating ways. Once she finally gets her hands on this book, she goes running for the hills and completely abandons you. And any kind of trust you put in her is thrown away by this pirate sea captain. The Qunari are pissed that the book was stolen, but they're more pissed about the injustice against the elven people in the city. As it turns out, this elf girl was raped by a member of the guard, yes, that guard that Aveline is supposed to be in charge of, and nothing was done about it because no one in Kirkwall cared. So 2 elves went and killed the guard themselves for justice. They then joined the Qunari and claimed sanctuary with them, since the Qunari compound kind of governs itself. Kirkwall wasn't going to have it. They were mad their guard was killed, and they wanted these elven kids to pay for their quote-unquote crime for taking justice in their own hands. Which is kind of funny if you think about how many people Hawk has killed for her own justice and for just doing random quests, so whatever. As Hawk, you can choose to say that the elves did the right thing and they should be spared, but that doesn't matter at all. There's no choice you can make that will stop the Qunari from burning Kirkwall to the ground. There's nothing you can do to try and make the peace. As much as I love the lore and life Dragon Age 2 has, I hate when this game takes so much away from the player. One could argue that feeling powerless in a game is in itself a mechanic, and in some cases that's completely true. But this felt like a waste of my time. It felt like a betrayal of this promise that was made, that this is a role-playing game, that I can make choices that will affect the entire game. I spent this act trying to understand the Qunari, trying to be honest with them, trying to be fair. And what did that get me? A burnt down Kirkwall and the quote-unquote opportunity to fight the leader one-on-one? I'm sorry, but this fight of running around and being a chicken shit mage isn't nearly as gratifying as using my charm and diplomacy to stop more people from dying. Or at least people I haven't already killed. Dragon Age 2 celebrated this idea of intimate storytelling and the hometown hero, but it got caught in its own storytelling and forced fights and storylines that simply shouldn't need to happen. You should be able to save your mom from becoming a grindhouse horror. You should be able to part with the Qunari peacefully without sacrificing a friend. And so finally, that brings us to my favorite story to tell about Dragon Age 2. The first time I played through Dragon Age 2, I really loved the second act. I really felt like I was making headway with the Qunari. I did everything in my power to be friends with them, the Arishok, and try and bring peace to Kirkwall, and use my status and my ability to have a great personality to try and fix things. I was super honorable with the Qunari. I always told them the truth. I was always up front with them, and I really honestly believed that I could gain their respect enough that they would just leave. Give them the thing they wanted, and just go. So, in my first playthrough, Isabela was like my bestie. And so when she came back with the book, I was like, cool, she's back with the book. I'll give the book to the Qunari, say some words, and they can just leave. And I was convinced, I didn't read anything on the internet. I was convinced that this game was telling me that I could do this. That I, who have tried so hard to gain the respect of the Qunari, could actually just get them to leave peacefully, and I wouldn't have to kill anyone, even though I had spent most of the game killing people. I didn't want to kill any more people. So I went through all the dialogue options, and I thought that I was picking the right one, and sure enough, I still got the big boss fight. And so I reset it. I went all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, and I tried some different options, and I still couldn't do it. The only way that I could avoid the boss fight was to give up Isabela, basically condemning her to death. So I actually went online after trying that 3 times. 3 times to try and make peace with the Qunari after working so hard to be friends with them and show respect to them. I went online and I checked to see if I could actually do this. And as it turned out, I couldn't, and I was totally crushed. And it's crazy to me how a game could be so good with telling a story. There are plenty of things wrong with Dragon Age 2, but the one thing it had going for it was that it could really immerse me into the story. And it sucked that this game basically gave me all these signals that I could do something, and then at the end, I couldn't do it. There was no way that I could make this happen. And I guess I don't understand that. And I'm glad that in Inquisition, they actually tried to give you more options and gave you the chance to settle things more peacefully in a lot of different situations that you couldn't do previously. I think it was Inquisition gets almost just as much shit as Dragon Age 2 does, but they seem to have learned from that lesson of giving the player a chance to roleplay, giving the player the chance to be the character that they want to be. And if you're trying to play the hero of Kirkwall, you should be able to do things in an honorable way. So anyway, that's my story. I had actually reset the game 3 times because I was convinced that there is some way, somehow, to end the conflict with the Qunari peacefully and not have to give anything up. And that's how great the game is and how bad the game is. And I think, like, that to me is a great representation of how this game is. It's so great in some places and so fucking terrible in other places. And I still have love for it. For all of the flaws that this game has, and for the disappointment it even brought me, I still think that a game that can make me feel that way and bring me down this road and show off this awesome world of different personalities and cultures, I don't know. I love it. So, yeah, that's my favorite Dragon Age 2 story. I got tricked by BioWare, which I guess isn't a big surprise to anyone listening now in 2017 or beyond. It's probably going to get worse, actually, but that's a different thing. All right. So, Dragon Age 2 Part 2. We fought the Qunari. We're still in Hightown. Our mom's dead. What could happen now? Oh, the leader of the Templars has red lyrium. Holy shit. Oh, the mages want to use blood magic. Oh my god. To pronounce Raz Algul. We're doing this. We're figuring this out. Here we go. Raish. Honestly, I think someone was reading a little too much Batman. Kirkwall and Gotham have a lot in common when it comes to corruption and dueling powers and strangeness. And the Qunari have enough in common with Ra's al Ghul's I got so excited that I could say Raish. Fuck. Alright.